Today's workshop is Pitching 101, the ultimate guide to captivating your audience. And I will introduce our speaker shortly. I'm just going to go through some of the key resources for the Beer and Boss Bowl. We have a submission resource folder that we provide for anyone and everyone. It is linked through the QR code here, as well as on the application portal on Startup Tree. And there's templates, submission examples. We have a couple slide deck examples from previous winners. We have our recordings that are being added in there, and then the guidelines and eligibility of how you're going to be scored and graded. So cash and in-kind service prizes is currently totaled over $200,000. We have over $100,000 in cash prizes. It breaks down in this graphic that you see. Grand prize is for $40,000. First place is 20, second is 10, third place is 5,000, and then fourth place would be for 2,500. And then additionally, we have in-kind prizes, which they have a monetary value to them that totals to over, what is it? I think 125,000. So we've got lots of packages this year, which we're excited to provide. But those packages work with some of our sponsored law firms where you can work with lawyers to get your patent approved, or there are marketing companies. We work with Amazon with their web service team, and there's a couple other amazing packages that are being finalized now. And then we additionally have a couple sponsored awards this year. The Digital Innovation Award is sponsored by the Digital Innovation Foundry. The Global Award will be presented by the International Business Center. And then the DEI Award will be provided and sponsored by Sedgwick. And then the iCorps Award, which is a new one for this year, will be sponsored by Blackstone Launchpad. I believe it's a $2,000 cash prize with abilities to get involved with the iCorps program, which is very exciting. And then on to our next slide. For the application process, we do require a pitch deck for you to submit. It does not have to be the final pitch deck that you plan to use for the live event if you become a finalist, but it does have to have the basic outline of a investor pitch, and you need to submit it as a PDF format with your notes included within the PDF, just so we know how to follow along on the slide deck. And then our next slide is now introducing Jake, our guest speaker. He actually has presented on Shark Tank, has started a couple businesses, and is involved with Philly startup leaders here in Philadelphia. Take it over, Jake. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and go over anything specific.
That's a good, I'll mention a few things, but hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Emily. Super happy to be with you guys. I'm a friend of Dr. Johnson, so really appreciate being here. And I have some familiar friends in the room, some faces in the room. Shout out to Linda. I saw you present as Bite Brave a couple weeks ago. Super well done. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about what you guys are up to. Emily mentioned a few of you. And I also know Francesca, if anybody knows her and her work. I've worked with her through an accelerator. And if anyone knows Mohawk in the undergraduate college, also another connection of mine to Temples. So really excited to be here. As Emily mentioned, I've been involved with a couple different startups. We were on Shark Tank with one as NERDiT NOW in 2019. And I always get invited to be a part of teaching a pitch and things like that because we did not have business model figured out. We were pitching something that was novel, and it really was the theatrics, the story, and the galvanization of our pitch that got us on the show. And I'm here to share some of those insights with you guys now. So thanks again. Okay, so what we're going to do to begin is we're going to jump into what I see and teach as the backbone of what a startup pitch deck should be. And there was a guy named Guy Kawasaki, not the same Guy Kawasaki who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but there was one on the Apple team with Steve Jobs, who has gone on to be one of the biggest tech evangelists in the Western world. And this pitch deck is his 10-slide backbone format. You don't have to have just 10 slides. You won't always have to emphasize aspects in this format. However, it's a great foundation, and that's why I'm using that for this presentation today. Go ahead, Emily. So, of course, this one is a little bit straightforward. You just need to have the title slide is just a 30-second one where you're going to have the name of your company. You should have some sort of slogan or phrasing, you know, like changing the world, be different, ultimate driving machine. Have your mantra or something like that on here so it can sort of speak to what you're about to show. That's really it. Super straightforward. So go ahead, Emily. Next slide, please. Okay, guys, when it comes down to not only your pitch deck, how you present your startup, and really your entire psychology of your perspective, you have to be thinking about problem. Problem, problem, problem. That's why this is really slide number 2, but technically the first content slide or topic or anything in your elevator pitch, you want to talk about the problem that you're solving. This might seem straightforward to you guys if you've already been hammering in the psychology for problem, problem, problem. But if you don't do this, so I guess I won't speak to that like you guys haven't heard of this, but if you don't do problem, what are some of the issues? Well, if you don't start with a problem, then you don't exactly know what your target customer is. You don't exactly know who you're solving it for. So then it's hard to develop a user persona, then it's hard to develop business models, then it's hard to identify pilot groups, and go-to-market strategy is nearly impossible. So you will see as we transition into this deck how if you do this backwards and you end up building a great product and solving something that you think the world needs, which is what 95% of startups do, they don't start with this and it leads them to huge problems later. What they turn into is what they call a startup that's a solution going around the world looking for problems. Okay. So things that you want to avoid, and some examples of companies that did this, and I want you guys to Google these if you haven't heard of them, but who has ever heard of a company called Segway? You know, everybody knows, but Segway was a great opportunity of an innovator and really an inventor. And you got to watch out for these individuals who they can see this need for something, an invention or a technology or whatever, but they're not actually solving a problem. So therefore they might release this great product and this great thing that nobody really wants. And so you have great examples like Segway. Even if you look into Slack, I wish there were a couple more people on video. I'd be asking you guys to raise your hands, but who knows of the company called Slack? Right? Slack actually started off as a game and nobody liked the game and it sucked because they weren't actually building a game that solved a problem in the gaming ecosystem where it was unique. They pivoted, and we'll talk about that later, and they figured out their differentiating value proposition, but Slack almost died because they didn't actually start off with a problem. So look into these companies that raised tons of money. There was a company called Color Labs that in the early days of Instagram that was trying to be an image-first social media platform. They raised $40 million, and because they weren't actually attacking a specific problem, in that social media journey when Facebook was already there, it wasn't as image focused, but they raised all this money and people were super excited, weren't tackling a problem, and the founders left in about 12 months. Also, I want you guys to look at Juicero. Juicero is another one of these projects. They raised $120 million in funding, but they weren't actually targeting a specific problem in what would be the CPG or the nutrition marketplace. They weren't actually attacking something properly. So you have to start with problem. What are you guys solving? Make sure you're doing that, and the rest of this is going to be okay. What are some tips to do this properly? Well, niche down. For example, if you're going to build a social media or an image sharing app or platform now, you can't just do one that's general. You need to niche down and, again, solve a specific problem for, say, healthcare professionals who need to share critical insurance data in a certain timely fashion. Now, maybe that is a product that you can build because, again, it solves a specific problem. So if you solve this problem, you get to identify communities that you can pilot with. You can be a part of their journey. You can even show them UX designs and things before you even have an engineer do it. So I wouldn't even mind making this a little bit more interactive and have questions along the way. So any questions about problem or what the opportunity you guys can solve? We're going to do Q&A at the end too. So cool. Okay, go ahead and do slide number 3, please, Emily.
Jake, I think Tara had a question.
Oh, hey, Tara. Yeah, I can't really see everybody in the chat, so I really appreciate that. Tara, go
No
ahead.
problem. Thanks. I'm already like, ooh, I love this. We have a super problem, and we found solutions for both the user and the people that serve the user. So like Do we place both problems in the problem statement?
You can. So what they call that is a double-sided marketplace. I'll give you an example. I know a guy who's building a LinkedIn for the cannabis industry because now it's illegal to even screen for certain things in your job application. And you have companies that want to avoid lawsuits and they see this as a time saving and a revenue generator and really just not muddying up the waters for future. And then you have all these people who are looking for jobs and who might even be willing to pay no different than a LinkedIn premium. So you have double-sided. Now, what you got to do though, you got to pick one. Okay. I'm working on a startup where we can solve a problem for soccer clubs that have a bunch of funding, or we can do the user model, kind of like the Facebook, where you build up this big audience and you solve a problem with them. So I bet you, Tara, you probably already know the answer to your question, but it's most likely easier to get started with one side of the marketplace. Who has more funding? Who do you have more relationships with? Which side of that problem do you understand better because you have experience or people on your team deeply have more exposure to that problem? So probably one of those makes sense. You can solve both, but you got to be careful about doing too many things at once. Does that help?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Very cool. Any other problem questions right now?
No, Jake, now I just realized you also know Damian Jordan, don't you?
Yeah, I do know. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome.
I couldn't remember that. Is he also a Temple grad?
No, he's a fellow entrepreneur friend.
Yeah. What a specific application where I can just very generally mention it and everybody knows, or, if you know about it, if you know,
Yeah.
So very cool. Yeah. He's a super duper entrepreneur. I bump into him like once every 6 months around here. Great person. So thank you, Linda. Go ahead, Emily. I don't think there's any more problem. All right. Actually, let's go back to value proposition. Sorry, that one is actually slide 3. So if you understand your problem, then you can understand this one. This is going forward. Let's go back to value proposition. We got one more. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so once you understand the problem that you're trying to tackle, then you should understand how you can even solve it. So I was a TEDx organizer for years, and part of the reason I'm here is because I met the startup Shark Tank founder on the TEDx stage and have coached a lot of people about how to present their idea worth sharing. And when you apply to main stage TED, which costs $10,000 to be in the audience, they only ask you 2 questions. What is your idea? That one's pretty straightforward. And then the second question is, why do you think you're the one to solve this idea? So in value proposition, you have to think about this. Like, what experience do you have? What pain in the world have you seen? Like, what makes you the person to go out and actually build a piece of technology that can solve this? Again, you either need to have inside industry knowledge, meaning, for example, not even industry knowledge, but let's just use Linda and Bite Brave for an example. She has children that have either severe food allergies or a very complicated food allergy journey, and she's firsthand seen this experience as a mom, and she wants to build a product in the marketplace that has lookalikes and other communities and things where there's clearly demand and appetite for it, but there's not exactly a solution to her need. So she's going to build it. So what people on your team, what have you seen? What user experience journeys have you gone out and talked to the people who are going to use your product? Again, in Linda's example, what moms have you surveyed? And again, what can you bring to the table for this presentation that shows that you can even begin to start to tackle this problem? This is again where your market research, having pilot partners and be talking to people who are actually your potential target customer. And again, all of these slides are going to build where if you don't know what problem you're solving, how can you go find people to survey, and how can you actually go start to develop a customer persona development, which is as you're talking to more and more people with this problem, you're like, okay, these people are in this bin and these people have a certain type of problem, but they're using this other thing. But these people, right? You can actually start to develop your customer persona if you, again, have a decent relationship with your value proposition. Here are a couple other tips. Okay. You want to think about how can your experience and whatever you're striving to offer start to save time, develop cost effectiveness, convenience, superior performance, unique features, these things, because again, you and your team understand the problem. You've surveyed people, you have momentum that shows that you are going to bring value and propose this problem. I'll give you some examples of some companies that did this well. Airbnb had a great pitch deck, and they saw this huge problem of people booking hotels, and they understood who their target user was, and that there were people who wanted to just pay for a premium Marriott, Hilton, whatever, and that's good. That wasn't their user. They had all these people who were just going to conferences and were traveling on a shoestring budget, and they knew their problem, and they knew that in their value proposition, they could fix this. Even though the idea, what they were proposing was crazy, the value proposition was decently positioned. Uber did this properly. Netflix did this very well. And so did Patagonia. Patagonia's value proposition is not only are we going to make you great clothing and compete with Arc'teryx and North Face, but we don't even really want to make a ton of money. We want to save the planet as well. And we want to make you a product that we sell you once and then fix forever. So their value proposition was a little bit different because they cared about the environment, and no other high quality extreme sportswear had done that before Patagonia. Any value proposition questions? This one is a little vague because it'll go right into slide 4. But any value proposition comments or questions so far? Cool. See you over here praying for the future, Linda. Cool. So this is where value proposition sort of levels up into what we call secret sauce or black magic slide. So you can, next slide, please, Emily. So this is where if you have a target, problem that you're going for, you can understand your user, you can provide a value proposition, and here is where you actually can show them what they're building. What the heck is it that you guys are figuring out? This is where you show the dashboard of the technology you're building. This is where you show the community groups, and you can show that you're actually building something towards intellectual property. You're differentiating value proposition. If anybody's ever heard about a concept of a moat, what is it that you guys are doing that's different and better and faster than all the other competition? This is a key slide. Okay, so you really need to make sure that it's simple, that you can communicate your core components, and people have to visualize this all the time. Show them the tech, show them the designs. Even if it's back of napkin for your interface, your SaaS platform that you're going to build, you have to simplify it and show them what you're actually going to build. Highlight the benefits, showcase results. Even if you're just showing people what this secret sauce is going to be, what did they say? How can you quantify what the perceived impact or the existing impact if you're actually piloting this? Because believe it or not, guys, if you do the first couple steps properly, you can get into a pilot with almost not even an MVP. You can start to show them what they're going to build, get feedback. But being able to demonstrate your black magic, your IP, your differentiating value, this is all the same sort of language. Any secret sauce questions? Yeah, go. Hey, Tara. Yeah, go ahead. Tara and Linda. I saw Tara might have beat you to it. Linda, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm always so with this one, we have a prototype. Should we have a photo as well as, or the diagrams and then the prototype, or are we double doing?
I think they're very similar, because showing the prototype, I guess what we're talking about is just like an early MVP, right? Or are you building a physical thing and you have to?
We have a physical thing that works.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I guess showing that prototype, and I would say, what is the stuff that's enabling you to build this physical thing? Do you have a utility patent? Is there something that's protecting you in the case that you guys have industry contacts and a pipeline that gives you some sort of super advantage to be the one that's actually making it? Maybe an aspect of your device is really only made here. We have a really big CPG, healthcare, and education markets here in Philadelphia. So maybe there's a company that you're partnered with that's right here and you have an advantage. So communicating that as you show the prototype. Yeah, that's exactly right. So you got it.
Awesome.
Linda.
Yeah, no, I was just going to bring up, for a company that's early, like Bite Brave, it's like the underlying magic is we're going to solve the world, right? The world's problems.
Yeah.
But trying to put that into something that is, it is really, we're so heavy in customer discovery right now to define that true value proposition, to get to that secret sauce. It's not an easy thing to do, right? This early.
That's right.
And I think even in my, in the pitches that I've done, it's like, that's where I've stumbled the most. And being able to story tell in that way, realizing that I don't have the full story yet is always good.
I think you're right around the corner from figuring this out, because you're right at that slide 3 with value proposition, where you know that you have a couple value propositions, but what is the one that you're actually going to tackle and get these moms into your ecosystem first? And then once you have these couple events that are coming up, I think you're going to have a little bit more direction, and you're going to say, this is what it's going to look like. This is the first thing they're going to do. This is the vision for the actual tech, and your secret sauce and underlying magic for where Bite Brave is headed, I think will start to crystallize.
Yeah, fair point. Thanks, Jake.
Cool. Any other secret sauce questions? I see we have a hand up. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, are you able to see me?
Well, no, it has like a no.
That's so weird. I have my video on. I don't know.
It
But
almost seems like
anyways,
you have another video app up, and I know you can't share. So if you have another Zoom window or a Google Hangout, maybe try to close those.
yeah, let me see. Is it good now? Able to see?
Might even have to refresh this, but it's okay. We'll take your question as a ghost question.
All right, sure. Well, it's so good hearing all this, but essentially, so I have a startup pretty early onwards, and essentially it's a fashion and media startup. And so for the prototype, it's a physical product, and also we have a newsletter and podcast to build community around us. So it's to empower women of first generation women of color to embrace body positivity and confidence. So what would you recommend to show on this slide? Because there's different things that do bring value proposition with one overall mission. So I also wouldn't want to confuse an investor, right? So what was your take on that?
It's a really good question. So it's fine, totally fine to be building momentum with community and a newsletter and have a content model and all of that. Those are generally things that are not really scalable and investable, especially not nowadays. Even look at a company like BuzzFeed that did take funding, and then after ChatGPT, they fired 180 writers because tech disrupted them. So the content model and the community stuff and all that, there's not really a scalability around that. So when you have more understanding of what this physical product is and how that is going to be a solution to your problem, that is the part that's investable. That's the part that's scalable. And I'd be really curious to learn more. I think we can save it for the Q&A at the end of the full presentation. But if I know what your physical product is and what it does and the problem that that thing solves, you probably can start to visualize what you need to talk about in your secret sauce slide about this prototype.
Gotcha, that makes sense. It's a Indo-Western bodysuit that's like streetwear essentially with elements of South Asian fashion incorporated into it.
Okay, and the person that would buy this, they are buying it because it solves what problem?
It helps them feel connected to their culture as a woman of color and empowers them to be more confident because the bodysuit and all the streetwear items that we sell are curated for comfort for women.
Great. So what you need to do in this slide is talk about, and you would dive into this a little bit more within your competitive analysis slide later on, which is slide 7. But you'd essentially show why your product is doing this in a different way and it's better. And you have either, again, some utility patent or some software that can analyze the bodysuit and do something. But this is where you really communicate how your product is special and that you and your team are the only ones that can do it. And you communicate some of those details later on in the rest of this presentation.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Jake.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great questions. I really appreciate, because it's very common for people like me and this whole industry to assume that people are just building some sort of tech product. There, again, here in Philadelphia, we have lots of healthcare physical devices and biotechnology physical aspects. So it's good to have that as an example. How do you pronounce your first name?
Rucha.
Rucha. Okay, very cool. Thank you. Don't want to get that wrong later. So thank you. Okay, any other secret sauce, magic questions? Cool. I am going to continue on. So next slide, please, Emily. All right, so this is where things start to get a little unclear for people who are student entrepreneurs or incredibly early phase, because again, most people are building something and they're not exactly sure what the problem is that they're solving. And then of course, you don't really know what your value prop is and who your customer is, and therefore what's your secret thing. And if you don't really have all that crystallized, then it's very, very challenging to figure out business model. So I understand where this sort of might become cumbersome, but we're going to talk about it anyway, because each and every one of you in this room will hit that phase eventually. Essentially, the business model is, how are you going to make money? Because that deep down is what everybody's trying to do here. Otherwise, you could just build an audience model and write content and develop a 1 million person newsletter. You could start a nonprofit and go out there and get grant money. You can't own a nonprofit. So again, in a startup lens and a founder ecosystem, you have to be on some sort of path to profitability, monetization. How are you guys going to actually make money? Okay, this is actually more simple than you would imagine. The simplicity around business model needs to be very straightforward, because if it's complicated, it's just not going to be something that translates to your investors. It's not going to be something that translates to partners. It should be super straightforward and cut and dry. I'll give you a couple examples of people and founders that have done that properly. So when you are in a store and you're going to check out, that thing where you check out is called a POS, a point of sale. It's not just a red bar scanner anymore. There's all these different dongles and apps and devices and all these things that can be your point of sale. The first one to ever do that was Square. That's why they had the partnership with Mega Brands. That's why you guys all know about them. That's why they charge the highest fees, because they're the best. And they were the first ones to actually offer mobile payments that are simple. And the business model was very clear. We're going to be an alternative to the traditional. Most of these credit card readers are operated by cell phone towers. It's really poor. Has anybody ever been trying to check out at a coffee shop and they're like, oh, the system's down? That's because that reader is no better than your cell phone network. It's horrible. So Square showed up to a solution to that as a mobile payments business model, and it was really straightforward, and that's why it took off right away. Patreon. Here's another example of a great business model. Everybody knows Kickstarter. Kickstarter showed up before Patreon. Great. Startup. I'm not sure if they were funded. I'm sure they were. But what's the problem with Kickstarter? You might be a part of a community, find some founder and support them, might pay them a bunch of money. And then is there any accountability for them to actually build that product and show back up? No. So that's why Patreon appeared, because it was this very clear business model where you have fans of people who wanted to support mostly independent documentarians and independent bands and musicians. And there was this appetite and demand to basically just give them a monthly whatever for no expectation. And they went out and had enough user data and people who were going to be a part of this. And the business model was very straightforward for investors, and they got funded and they ended up becoming very successful. There's a final example here. It's two titans in this industry, Headspace and Calm, that are both products and platforms for mental health solutions. They're like meditation apps, right? But Calm in their business model was so simple and straightforward, even though they came after Headspace, which was more of a freemium, like the Facebook model. We're going to build up this big free service and figure out how to monetize this later. Calm showed up afterwards with this very straightforward approach to their business and app, and it was successful because of that. So I know that we might not have a few folks who are here, but any sort of business model questions or thoughts or challenges that you guys have right now? Very cool. Here's another good ways to visualize business model in a simple and concise way. And some of the examples I use, go ahead, Tara, before I get into this section. Go ahead, Tara.
I could probably answer the question. So with our business model, we are expecting, it's with hospitals, we're expecting, because we're going to save them so much money and time and blah, blah, blah. We're expecting a pretty fast push up. It's so it's based in reality, but it's like a serious hockey stick. Do we go more regressive or do we go more aggressive? What's the best way?
Well, so this is definitely something that I think the financial projection slide later on is a little bit more attached to, but it is hard to look out into the future and forecast. So you do have to look retroactively at what you guys are doing. And then based on your company milestones that you have ahead, you're supposed to create a 2 to 3 year roadmap. You will be able to communicate and reinforce why you're going to have accelerated growth. And there are a few tactics where you can start to deploy and ensure that you're going to get to that. And I think if you communicate those milestones and how you're going to operate when you hit them in order to amplify this hockey stick growth, if you can do that properly, they will believe you.
Okay, thank you.
Another key here for this is that you have a few critical assumptions that you are communicating to understand that this is going to happen. If a few things don't occur, these are the assumptions, then you're not going to get this hockey stick growth. And one of the components we're going to talk about later on in slide 9 is that if you can eliminate those amount of assumptions and also with massive confidence communicate how these assumptions are negligible, because you say, oh, well, we know boom, 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 boom. So this assumption is 99% going to happen. If you can communicate that and reduce the amount of assumptions in general, they will have confidence that you're what they call, again, hockey stick, knee to the curve, going from linear growth to exponential growth. You can communicate these things will happen with confidence.
Okay, so then the business model is not the financial model. It's like, is it a line? What is the best way to chuck a business model out there?
That's a great question. So business model of a lemonade stand is, hey, you got people out at the park who are playing Frisbee and they're thirsty and there's no options. And so we're going to offer lemonade, and the lemonade costs this amount of money. We got to pay people here. This is what the insurance and the liability costs. And because of that and these expenses, this is where we're going to charge. And here is our profitability and margin. It's more the actual business model is how it's going to work today and what are the unit economics of that. The projections is going into the future, and that's where your milestones and when this part of the tech rolls out. And then when we have a little bit more focus on marketing and user acquisition, then this is going to happen. So business model is now, and what we're going to do in order to roll this out, it's more of like right in front of you. And then the projections, you generally want to do 2 to 3 years. I think in this deck, I'm looking at a 3-year financial projection. So I think you pretty much knew it's kind of like a fork in the road where it's like now and then future, right? And I don't know, Emily, if you can change it back, but I used to be able to see people and I can only see me now. I can just remove the spotlight. Never mind. Great. Okay, we're good. Any other business? Thank you. Any other business model questions, guys? Cool. All righty. So we can go on to next slide, please, Emily. Oh yeah, I have a couple other examples of slides that showed business model really well, how they communicated it in such a simple fashion, and all of these decks should be public. So even though WeWork fell from grace because the founder is out of his mind, and also they put a lot of dumb stuff in their IPO filing paperwork, like you could see that the whole thing was corrupt even when they filed for IPO right before COVID. But their business model projections and their visualization in their deck was very good. So take a look at that. Even BuzzFeed, even though they're in a different capacity today, they really communicated their content marketing business model, which led to a $1.6 billion valuation in 2015, which is nuts. That's also the year 2015, the year that this phrase unicorn company was created. It's a new term. And just so you know, you guys should not use that loosely. Only about 50 or 60 companies have ever exited for over $1 billion. Doesn't matter if you're valued at $1 billion. Did you exit for $1 billion? That's why we use that term unicorn. And at one time, BuzzFeed was labeled as one. But go take a look at their business model slide. Buffer, the social media platform, had a good one. And then there's another one called Contently. So you got a lot of these content marketing, content related companies where they show their design and their graphic communication skills in their decks. So check out their business model slides. All right, slide number 6 is the go-to-market plan. So me, as my background's actually engineering, and I've moved into this entrepreneurial space just like Linda, and the skill and the lane that I have really developed some thought leadership around is marketing and how to actually communicate your idea and your go-to-market plan. So I love this part. But a lot of founders are product focused and community focused, and they usually neglect user acquisition and marketing, not because that's, any fault of their own, but it's usually something that a lot of founders need help with, and they generally don't have a critical team member until they raise money. So go-to-market plan can be a big struggle for a lot of founders. So let's talk about that today. And real quick, I have a story. So again, a lot of founders think that just because your idea, your tech, your thing is so good, people will just come and use it. Wrong. Has anyone ever heard of the phrase, the best idea since sliced bread? Has anyone ever heard of that? Linda, did we talk about this?
I think so, yes.
Exactly. Well, you already know it then. So, you're not allowed to answer. But has anyone heard of the sliced bread thing? You're like, oh, the best idea since sliced bread. People have heard of this, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, it's really interesting when you talk about that because sliced bread was created by an inventor in the Midwest in like the 1930s. And again, the inventor focused on product, focused on this thing, didn't focus on who actually needed it, how to roll it out, and some sort of marketing plan. His name was Otto Rollweiler or some guy. I'm pretty sure he was from Arkansas. So again, he came up with the sliced bread machine, and he went from house to house and store to store and really came around with a world-changing idea that for the first 10 years of the rollout strategy didn't do anything, didn't go anywhere, nobody wanted it or cared, and he failed. It wasn't until Otto sold the idea to this company that we all know of, that is Wonder Bread. And they slapped on this beautiful brand. They had an unbelievable rollout strategy. And they took this idea that was pretty good and actually marketed it properly. And now everybody knows about sliced bread being one of the best ideas in the world. Was it a good idea, or was it some of the best go-to-market plan execution that we've ever seen? I would argue the latter. So what you need to do about go-to-market plan is, if you're doing all these things right, then you have your problem nailed down, you have communities that you're talking to, and you should have a list of pilot partners that you can even start to have looking at your tech, looking at your product, looking at your device, whatever it is that you're making. So you should already have the first tier 1 or tier 2 figured out within this, is that you're piloting this with potential users, and your go-to-market plan is getting this in the hands of early users to get some feedback. After that, you really need to make sure that you have some other aspects of a rollout, whether you're doing traditional marketing and you have content applications, or you have some sort of partner strategy. There's an entrepreneur here named Yasmin who developed a device solution in the healthcare space, where their healthcare workers sometimes get cornered by patients who have mental challenges, and they're either delusional or have dementia, and they might think that they're actually in a threatening spot and may be confused about who this healthcare worker is, and it's actually a foe than a friend. And some of these healthcare workers get cornered by patients. And what Yasmin and Roar did was they actually built a device where all of their nurses and aides and doctors had something that they had on there is a connected tech, where a security person was there in 45 seconds. Her go-to-market plan was just to pilot with groups that had 24 locations here, 38 locations there. So you need to be developing some sort of rollout strategy that is tiered, where you can start off with things that are a lower CAC, cost of acquiring a customer. And then along the way, once you have funding, you can do ad strategies, you can do paid user things and stuff like that. But you have to build this pyramid of a go-to-market plan. Again, what's the stuff that's easier, lower hanging fruit that you can build up to, and then along the way become more sophisticated. And we don't need to talk about those marketing strategies, because I'm not really sure if they're as applicable for you guys in the next year or two. But this is super key, to not just think that because your thing is better and different, it's going to work. Any questions about go-to-market? This is really like the marketing slide. Give a couple examples if I'm waiting for some hands. Sometimes I'm afraid to minimize this in case I miss hands, but let's talk about a couple failures of go-to-market. So everybody knows about the Microsoft HoloLens and a couple other products that are finally ready for market. But if anybody remembers Google's attempt to roll out a VR headset it was almost 10 years ago, called Google Glass. They said, oh yeah, this tech is here, we'll just roll this product out. They had no marketing plan, no go-to-market strategy at all, and a behemoth like Google with a great product that actually worked. It didn't really look cool, but they didn't focus on any sort of marketing, and who knows about Google Glass today? It's gone. Big brands have a way of doing this that just assume that their brand name and their existing everything is going to work. Because even Google, they came out with a thing called Google Plus, Google Wave, all these different products that were trying to compete with other ecosystem competitors, and they all failed because they didn't actually work on marketing. Microsoft even came up with a device called the Zune to compete with iPod, and they had a decent product that was cheaper, and it was even arguably better than the iPod. No rollout strategy, no user acquisition, go-to-market plan, and the Zune is gone. So the keys to this is you have to really understand your target customer and what they do, where they spend their time, where they spend their money now, and you can develop a rollout strategy based on that. You need to understand how to effectively acquire them, and of course, I think this gets into Tara's question and a little bit of the expansion and looking downstream for Bite Brave and Linda, but how are you going to scale and expand your market share as your startup grows? This part is key, because that's why I use that pyramid analogy, is that as you grow, your go-to-market plan needs to evolve with it. Any go-to-market questions so far, guys?
But to do that pyramid effectively, you have to do a lot of things in parallel. I mean, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're doing a crap ton of stuff as it is, but especially as it relates to go-to-market, because the rollout needs to be, in a way, could be sequential, but then some things take much, much longer to come to fruition.
Absolutely. You got to be having your partner conversations, your community pilot conversations, be doing grassroots events with people and coordinating with venues. You got to be doing content marketing, all these things. And yes, they are happening in parallel quite often. And then I would say, in addition to what you said, Linda, is the pie chart of where that emphasis is applied will certainly shift and evolve over time. So you got it.
Yeah.
A few companies that did this very well was Canva, actually. So their target users were a bunch of content creators who were either entrepreneurs or designers and marketers themselves, and they made content just for those designers and marketers. So if really what Canva was the democratization of graphic design. Instead of paying Adobe InDesign whatever amount per month, we just use Canva for free. So they brought graphic design for everyone. So what they did was they had a massive content marketing strategy where they put out all this great blog content and social media content about how to amplify existing graphic designers and content creators. And then those people saw it. And then as soon as they saw the solution as Canva, it's like, oh, wow. So a very effective strategy by Canva within that. And then Notion as well. Notion had this famous $10 billion go-to-market strategy. And a part of the reason why Notion was successful is they sold the ability to take all of your to-do list and all the things that you are doing within your startup and build them into blocks. And they really marketed this out that if you can actually block out your task management and block out your founder and startup management, this is going to work. They knew that that was their differentiating value proposition. That was like their secret sauce. And they marketed that super heavily. So check out what Notion did in their marketing plan. All right, competitive analysis. This is a great, unlike business model, this is a great slide to start thinking about before you're even there. So go ahead, Emily, with next slide, please. All right, so there's a couple traps to avoid here. I hear a lot of founders saying, here's what we're building and this is that, and nobody's done this yet. Well, that's like a really bad attitude, because what you want is to find an ecosystem where there's a bunch of competitors all vying for ideally the same market share, because what that shows is that there's enough demand and the problem is big enough that you do have a bunch of competitors, and this is a really healthy thing. There's a book about this. It's called Blue Ocean Strategy. Okay. I kind of hinted on this earlier. If you were going to try to go build a social media app today, you're dead, right? But if you can understand where your competitors are, Facebook does this, LinkedIn does this, all these other, you even have Romper, I'm looking at you here, Linda, a social media app for the moms of the world, right? If you are going to position your startup properly, you really need to have a great grip on your competitive analysis, because then it shows what your competitors don't do and what you're going to do better in order to show cost effectiveness, time savings, pain point alleviation. So you really have to understand these competitors. Here's another thing that a lot of founders miss is that back in the day, Microsoft was building this product. Let's just use Microsoft Excel for an example, right? Well, there was no competitor to Microsoft Excel. They're like, oh, we're just going to make this and it'll work. That's also the wrong attitude, because what's the competitor to Excel? I could literally just have all of these paper documents and be scanning them into doing literal analog bookkeeping. That's what everybody had to do. And analog bookkeeping, pen and paper bookkeeping, was the competitor to Microsoft Excel before it existed. So if you don't acknowledge what your users can use, how your users can navigate the world without your product, what are they using now? Again, I come from a civil engineering background. So before we build a new building or bridge, we always talk about the no build option. What is our city going to be like if we build nothing? So your competitor analysis slide and conversation and attitude starts there. What are my users doing today? What am I competing? What's the status quo? Because, and final thing before I get into a little bit more content about this, it could be your competitor could be some really old, clunky, horrible software or tech or platform or whatever. But if it takes a huge lift to get them out of that, again, you need to understand that. You need to understand where your customers are today and what they're using today and what you're up against in order for them to evolve into your solution. Couple other tips. Okay. So you need to show how you've distinguished yourself in the marketplace. And not only are you better and different, but again, the more you understand these key players and what they do and what they don't do, that's what you need to be talking about here. And you'll be able to demonstrate this, the market opportunities, your competitive advantage, and again, your business defensibility. A lot of people call this the moat, right? If you understand what you're going to do better and faster and different than your competitors, then you're going to be defensible. You're going to have a better competitive advantage. Investors often see this slide as a perfect way to measure your business acumen and your strategic ability. I'll say that again. Investors judge you on this slide and they measure your business acumen and your strategic ability. So again, this is not as black and white or numbers, ones and zeros as your business model. This is about how you see yourself edging out and positioning yourself in the market because you understand it super well. Few things to include. So again, include your direct and your indirect competitors along with your no build. And again, the more you focus on your customer needs and understanding them about what your competitors don't offer and this pain point that you can solve because of your tech, that's what you need to show. You can also talk about benchmarking here. Okay, every industry, and I'm not gonna, well, I guess maybe we will. For example, in the fashion world, there's probably some benchmarking about how much an average garment costs. What is the average wait time for sourcing for all of the units in order to make something? What is the factory components? How much supply chain management? Once stuff is all there, do you have it all moving around the world? If you can measure all these industry averages and industry standards as a benchmark and then said, because of our solution, we are going to be 30% faster, we're going to be 56% cheaper. So again, it gives you a way to compare yourself to these industry benchmarks if you understand your competition. Few examples of companies that did this very well. We got a local Philadelphia team out of Wharton called Warby Parker. It's very rare to see some of these bigger teams. I think, Linda, you even knew of one. Warby Parker was a 4-person team, and they positioned themselves very well because there was no one to compete with those 2 Italian eyeglasses conglomerates that had literal international monopoly, and they were going to be the first startup to ever offer high quality, fashionable glasses for under $100. And they knew in their competitive analysis and showed it in their slides that they were going to come into this marketplace and dominate. And they did. Other companies that did this super well, once they pivoted away from a game, Slack really dominated the competitive analysis conversation because there really wasn't a team management ecosystem that was set up for small, nimble teams. You had some of these other things that were built for big corporate teams, but not for nimble startups. And that's what Slack was positioned for. Now it's a $10+ billion company. Airbnb did this pretty decently. Buffer did this pretty decently, but I would really look at Warby Parker as the North Star here. Sure we'll have a competitive analysis question or two if you guys have one now. Cool. Alrighty. Well, the last 2 slides are even more vague and have less clarity than business model. Sorry, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. Management team is actually really important. I thought we were on to slide 9. So yeah, management team slide. So on the front end, this feels super straightforward, but teams mess this up a lot by talking about themselves. So you got a couple different individuals you need to show. And I think for a lot of you, that will be more simple because you don't have a board yet. You might not have official advisors yet or ecosystem partners yet. But for your core team, a lot of you will either be solopreneurs and it'll just be you. But just have your name, your title, and maybe a qualification or 2 that gives you the eligibility to be a founder. But keep this simple, just headshots, names, titles, and then maybe an aspect of why they're on the team. Okay. Don't forget about your advisors, mention them. If you have some sort of board, which again, generally until you actually are funded, you don't really have a need for a board. So I don't think that you guys really need to show much of that. If you have them, show them. And the reason for this is that showing the team, it boosts credibility, it gives a human connection. Maybe you can talk about how somebody was a Harvard this, or, just mentioning how somebody went through Y Combinator, right? You can give this human connection. It highlights domain expertise, reinforces the commitment. If you show this baller team and all these industry professionals who came from this background and that background, it's like, oh, wow, this is such a good team. Boosts their investor confidence, supports the overall narrative, and again, sets you up for a competitive edge. If you have this unique team that can attack this problem from a couple different avenues and experience points and skill sets, then again, that's going to be a part of your competitive edge. You want to show a clear connection to the industry. One of the startups that I'm with, the main one is called Athletify. We're building like an online dashboard and reporting tool for parents and families to follow along their youth soccer player. One of the things I worry about is that we have backing by an investor who is a restaurateur. He's not a tech founder. He hasn't built a sports thing, has no connection to soccer. So I worry that we are going to get a little bit more criticism because our lead supporter isn't really the best backer for us, and that's okay. We're moving around it, but I wanted to give a little bit of a personal example. If you could show the people who are behind you are super connected and really make sense in your amplification of your journey, then that's what you want to communicate. I would love you guys to look into a couple companies who did this super well. Pinterest, of course, once upon a time it was called Tote. And the biggest thing they had was a great team because they didn't have a good idea. They didn't really have a good rollout strategy, but they had a really good team. And once they figured out that they needed to do a pin board, visualization, community, social media, I don't really know how to describe Pinterest, but you guys all know what it is. And the team was really the shining asset. Another really awesome story for you guys to look at is go look at the Pandora. I know Spotify sort of shines as the biggest internet radio or online streaming service, but Pandora once upon a time was ahead of Spotify. Pandora had a 50-person full-time employee team. And because the team was so succinct, unified, believed in their mission, and the leadership knew how to actually keep this team together, they lost their funding. I think the CEO took a huge drop in salary or dropped their salary down to almost nothing or $1 and kept on this 50-person team for 2 years with almost no funding and kept people working on this product with almost no, if not no salaries because they had this great team. They believed in something and they knew that if they could figure it out together, eventually it would be a hit and all of these people would be rewarded properly. And they did. They stuck it out. 50 people worked on this project for 2 years with no money. So take a look at the Pandora. Sometimes all you have is a good team. That's kind of what I mean. And I've seen plenty of projects with this. They call it jockey investing or a jockey team instead of the horse. The horse is your tech. The horse is your product. But sometimes if you have the right team, the people riding the product, riding the horse, some people will invest in any jockey in the, they'll bet on any jockey in the sports betting world because they believe in that jockey. They don't care what horse they're riding. So again, who are you? Who is your team? Why are they the right composition of individuals to solve this problem? Any team questions? You guys will have an opportunity to give your super specific and curated questions about anything you want at the end of this. So we're almost through. Okay, Emily, next slide, please. All right, so financial projections, this part is super unclear and muddy because most people, until they get to a pre-seed or until they actually have multiple versions of an MVP, they can't possibly even understand what their business model is going to be. So how can you even do financial projections? So this is a little bit of a future lesson. And so we're going to keep it a little, short and sweet. But again, one thing to think about it is pro forma. Again, it's looking into the future. We all know that we're extrapolating here. So who knows what's going to happen? Imagine all these teams that had 3-year projections, then COVID hit, right? Then the housing bubble happened. Then the .com bubble happened, right? No matter what you think is going to happen in the future, it's probably not, but you still need to project. And the reason that you do this is that founders forget about this. But the reason why an investor writes you a check is they want to know when you guys are going to sell this whole boat. So unless you're building projections for how this thing is going to make more money or make money, then there is really no daylight for how you're going to sell the product. So you at least need to be extrapolating and guessing into the future. So this is why this is important no matter what. We hinted at this because of Tara's awesome question, but the key here in your financial projections is to eliminate as many assumptions as possible. Keep those to a minimum because the more assumptions that you have to do in your projecting, the more likelihood that one of those assumptions is either kind of wrong. It will probably, most of them will be kind of wrong, but then actually you will probably be starkly incorrect with a few of them. So the more that you can eliminate gives investor confidence, and it also helps you in your journey along the way. Couple other things that you want to mention is, this is, again, getting into your question. It's a great question, Tara, but in your financial projections, you generally do want to show some sort of either market saturation or what they call product market fit. Don't get it twisted. Product market fit is not that your tech is working, and it's product market fit is when you can't hire salespeople fast enough because you really got something here, right? Until you get to those things and until you reach those milestones, again, financial projections are very hard, but here are ways that you can sort of predict those milestones or show when these change in financial projections are going to be there. When are you going to be able to open up more of this pipeline? Do you have a pipeline of pilots that you've been talking to, 300 of them, potential pilot partners for 2 years? Then you have 10 that you've actually piloted with, 50 that you're about to pilot with in the next 6 months, but then you have this pipeline of 300, right? Like things like that will help in your financial projecting. There are also things like network effects. So again, if you have something like a social media or something where it's remarkable, which means worth making a remark about, you're going to have people who share it. You're going to have more content about it. You're going to have media about it. So what sort of networking effects can you bake into your financial projections to show additional growth? And there's also this thing called a land and expand opportunity. So for example, we'll use Yasmin and Roar, which was the connected tech element. So when she rolled out her pilot with 24 locations, I'm pretty sure that organization had 300 others. And if it went properly for, yeah, remarkable, worth making a remark about is a Seth Godin quote. So what she did was she actually had this ability to have like an iceberg component in her financial projections, where if things are looking properly with these 24, we're going to roll them out with the rest of these 300. So it gets into, again, if you have your, your user stuff and your partner stuff and you have your go-to-market plan dialed in about what you think is going to happen and what you think you're going to do, this financial projections aspect is a little bit easier. So a few other things to mention here. So understanding your sales cycle is key here. How long does it take you to land a new customer? It might just take a few weeks to get a new mom, but if you have to convince like a real estate developer to use your platform, it could take a year. I come from, again, civil engineering background, did some business development. It took 18 to 24 months to land a new client because sometimes they were $300 million projects. So understanding your sales cycle is key to your financial projections. Consistency in your sales cycle and making sure that the things you talk about here are in alignment. Consistency in your financial projection slide and being in alignment with everything that you said and all of your, again, go to market and what is the business model. A lot of people will sneak in stuff and they'll say, because of this, we're going to make all this money and we're going to grow. And it's something that is new in this slide. Nothing can be new here. It has to be consistent with the rest of your presentation. Another way to simplify this is break it down into unit economics, right? And so maybe you don't know exactly how many moms are going to be in your platform by 12 months or 24 months, Linda, but what are the financial projections around a single mom? And if you can get X moms per whatever, how does that scale? Because generally, as you onboard more and more individuals, your units of scale, your cost of acquiring a new customer start to go down. So if you understand these aspects, you can dial in your financial projections. If you have different projects that you're connected to or partners that you're connected to, when are they actually going to adopt the tech? When are, again, their go-to-market aspect, how does that actually get baked into your financial projections? So you will see that as you get towards the end of this presentation or as the end of a core startup pitch deck, part of these slides are heavily reliant on a prior slide being super accurate for where you are. Few examples of companies that did their projection slide super well. I really like the company called Away, the luggage company. So she, young female entrepreneur, nailed those financial projections about showing up with a cutting edge luggage product that was going to disrupt the marketplace. And she did it. And the financial projections were very well done. Rent the Runway did this super well because they had a little bit of information on that was a company where instead of going out and buying a $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 ballroom dress, you could just rent it and get it in the mail. And they had enough user data and had enough piloting to show exactly what this was going to look like. So go ahead and look what Rent the Runway did for their financial projections. And until Robinhood upset me and I talk badly about them publicly, but I won't do this because this is recording, they actually had a really good financial projections about the democratization of stock trading. They were the first platform to really bring stock trading and buying equities to everyone. I know they kind of messed up during that whole GameStop fiasco, which is, I would encourage you guys to look into all that, where they protected their institutional investors instead of their retail investors, which is what the product is for, which is ridiculous. But they at least nailed their financial projections, and that's why they were super successful early. Any sort of financial projections questions? I just feel like this one is a carrot on the stick in the future for a lot of early stage startups. Cool.
Sorry, I'll just jump in. I couldn't find the button for my hand.
Yeah.
Total meltdown right now. For financial projections, it's total bullshit, really.
Oh yeah.
I mean, nothing. So what are the, and the guys that are going to be watching us are going to be like, this is bullshit. What do we get to say that will stop it from being bullshit? Like,
It's a great question. I come from, again, a marketing, and even in my engineering days, what we were doing was doing, they called it urban travel demand. So you would try to assume that you knew where trips were going to go. And we called it a lot of wand waving, where if you go up there with the right smoke and mirrors, you can convince people that your financial projections, like, oh yeah, this is it. So this is where understanding your business model that you think you're going to roll out, or the one that's working now, and being in accordance to that. And then really understanding your competitive analysis, right? What are the software products that exist in the world? What are the physical products that exist in the world? What are they charging for? What did they charge for over time? And using all of the things that you do know or do have, so that you, again, eliminate the amount of projecting. And I think the way that you do that is going back to those assumptions and saying, okay, how many of these assumptions can we eliminate? And the ones that we do have to make these financial projections complete, how can we be the most secure in these assumptions so that you're giving confidence in the room from your investors? Got any other?
lovely, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Any other projection? It's definitely being recorded. I can see the recording. It's definitely being recorded. I said I won't talk too badly about Robinhood because it is being recorded.
Yeah, just to clarify, it is being recorded and we'll be posting it on our YouTube tomorrow.
Very cool. Okay, so the final slide is somewhat straightforward, except for the use of funds part. So this is like a conclusion slide right before they go into their Q&A. That's why there's kind of a few things lumped in. So you can go and move to the next slide, please, Emily. So this gives you the opportunity to, after all of this, say, here's what we have done, right? And this is where, if you have any funding or angel round, you can say, you know, this, we had this money and this is what we did. We went for this pitch competition and this is what happened. We are a part of this accelerator and this is what's going on now, or this is what we're applying from that accelerator or incubator. Timeline is looking into the future, right? Every investor wants to know, when are you going to be able to provide me with a return on investment? Maybe you're actually sitting with a strategic partner, or again, we'll continue to use the Yasmin and the Roar example because I've used it so many times, but maybe you have a hospital, a strategic partner in the room, and they actually aren't as into the timeline and the ROI, but about revenue strategies and the timeline of when you guys will be able to do a different revenue strategy, or you'll be able to try this second thing. So again, a timeline of what things are going to look like together. But then use of funds, I think, is a thing worth talking about. So I'm going to focus on that today. But besides other use of funds things, milestones that you guys might want to write down or mark is product development. So rolling out additional features, when your MVP is going to be ready, when you are going to pilot, when you're going to actually have a section in your journey to then take that feedback, build it in, roll it back out. So again, product development, marketing strategy. So this is to Linda's point, is throughout your timeline, you're going to be deploying and experimenting with different marketing strategies. So what does that look like in your timeline? When are you going to launch certain things? So when are you going to roll certain stuff out, which is called product launch? Key hirings. When are you actually going to hire that co-founder CTO to build your thing? When are you actually going to hire a CMO? When are you actually planning on hiring a sales team? Things like this. And then fundraising, meaning, hey, we're raising money right now. And then there should be a time in your 3-year journey where you need to raise again, and then probably even raise a third time before 3 years. So these are aspects in your timeline. But let's talk of use of funds. Okay, use of funds is super critical, because even in a Shark Tank conversation, they want to know, what are you going to do with my money? So here are things that you need to keep in mind for use of funds. So make sure that you're doing up-to-date numbers and projections. A lot of founders, they admit, they're like, all right, yeah, you know, they talk about use of funds, and then they're showing milestone and projection data from like 90 days ago. And these investors, they will walk out even after 25 minutes to get to this final slide. So make sure everything is up to date. It's got to be clear and simple. And the more that this is complicated about your milestones and what you're going to be doing in the future and how you're going to apply the funding, they're not going to like it. If it's complicated, you probably don't even understand it. So how can your investor understand it? And then how can other strategic people who are going to hopefully come after these investors, because you guys are all going to have a cap table where you have all these different investors that have some percentage of your company, most likely, and each of them needs to be able to understand where this thing is headed. So keep it simple, keep it concise, keep it clear. Facebook did a good idea of this. Even though they didn't know how to make money, they knew how they were going to spend investor money. They knew what they were going to build. And they had this whole rollout strategy of go to Ivies and then go to US colleges and then just US. And they knew exactly what they were doing in their go-to-market plan. And so because of their go-to-market plan was super dialed in, they knew exactly how to spend money. And then even after they IPO'd, I think it was like 22 months after they IPO'd, they didn't have a monetization strategy, which is ridiculous in the context of today, but they at least had a good use of funds slide in their deck. So go ahead and find that. Here's some other things that you really need to know is defining your ask. How much are you raising? And Emily, to your point earlier, before we even started, let's have a conversation about valuation. In order to know how much you're asking for, you need to know what you're even worth today. So when we were on Shark Tank, we actually were not a software company. We weren't a device company. So depending on the category that your startup is in, there will be this thing called a multiplier, meaning whatever you're making in 1 year or whatever you expect to make in a decent year, either an early year or a healthy year, and then you multiply that by a certain number. A lot of software companies are like a 15 or a 20x multiplier. So a company that made $20 million, a company that made $1 million last year is worth like $20 million. And so once you know what you're worth, then you need to figure out how much debt you want to take on, how much you actually can raise and be sufficient into the future, and then how much you actually need. And then you break down your use of funds within that. So just figuring out what you're worth, what you can raise within that lens, and then how you're going to actually use it. I'll give you guys a pro tip here. You hear all these different things like an angel check, which means somebody that may or may not take equity and just write you a check because they believe in you. But then the things that are a little bit more formatted, you have a pre-seed raise, and that's almost always $250,000 to $500,000. And that's typically a pre-revenue, somebody who can see you piloting, see your momentum, understand the problem, believe in your team, but you're not making any money. And you go out and raise $250,000, $500,000 to hire that CTO to actually build the MVP. So there's that. And then a lot of times you have a seed raise, which is anywhere between 1.2, 1 million. A lot of seed raises are like $2 million, on like 2 to 2.5. And then that is where you hire your CMO, your sales teams, and things are working. And you think product market fit is either here or you're just around the corner. And then your Series A's and things, and a lot of people in entrepreneurial rooms, once you hit Series A, they I don't know, they've either moved away or it's hard to get these people nailed down to any sort of events or anything, but this is your 5 to 10, usually like a $10 million raise and up. So again, back to where we're talking about, we're looking at a use of funds of like, call it 250, $250,000. So again, how much runway do you have? How are you going to use, what are you going to use it for? What do you need? Some other tips for that is you got to be really specific in the funding that's requested. Again, if you deeply know how much you need, how long that is going to go for, and the more you understand how you're going to churn through that, they call it burn rate, right? How fast is this money going to be gone before you either need to hit making money, but probably you're going to have to raise again. This is why all these different startups raised. Segway raised 17 different times, $256 million, and still never even really returned the investment for investors. Outlining key growth milestones within this. We already talked about that. Segment the use of funds by department is a way to simplify this. If you don't know exactly how much you're going to spend on all these different line items, then just simplify it. Break it into marketing, break it into product. That's why I mentioned these categories: product development, marketing, your launch aspects, your key hires, these aspects. These are the parts that you need to make sure you use into your use of funds. And then ultimately, you want to make sure you buffer in for contingencies. If you hear these guys, they always talk about, oh yeah, we're doing a bridge round. What that means is they didn't raise enough money. So you always need to make sure that you buffer in 10 to 20% extra because chances are that you got some things wrong and you're going to need a little bit more time or a little bit more money. And arguably they're the same thing when you're in your journey. So any use of funds questions? I know, again, we're really looking into the future, but I see the questions swirling around your head, Linda.
I was just thinking, I think I'm going in too high. I know that a pre-seed round is typically in that 250 to 500. But sometimes, and I was talking to an investor yesterday about another company, and they were like, you need to go in with what you need, right? And if what you need is more, then, so be it. It's better to just go in with what you need than having to go back over and over for money.
Yeah. I think that's a fine attitude. The other attitude with sales alone, which is what pitching investors is let the market say no. So if you ask for 750 or $1 million,
Yeah.
you know, I know somebody doing a $1.2 million seed round right now, and that sounds really high, but he's got most of it committed. It's like not $800,000 or $900,000. So if you get a lot of hard no's with your number, Linda, then it's like, okay, maybe we'll dial this thing back. But yeah, let the market say no. Because
Yeah.
what if you do show up with that 300K valuation and they thought you were double, right?
Yeah.
Then you kind of shot yourself in the foot by not letting the market say no, which is start
Yeah.
high typically and then dial it back. That doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for all startups and situations, but I think that might work for you, Linda. So
Yeah, thanks, Jake.
cool. Tara, I know you got something for us.
I have so many. I want a one-on-one. Jake,
Well,
I am totally in love with you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm in love with Temple entrepreneurial ecosystem in general, so the feeling is mutual. And I think we're into like full Q&A now, so you can take up as much time as you want. And then, yeah, I mean, I've been chatting with Linda one-on-one. I'd love to give you some advice as well. So yeah, don't be afraid to fire off questions now.
Yeah. So our product is a portable bidet.